Hello, welcome back to Inform New Hampshire. My name is Rich Merritt. Joining us today is State Representative Richard Marple from Hooksett, and is that District 24?
24th.
24, okay. And Jim McKinley on my far left. And today's topic is going to be about trafficking. We'll get into that in 1 second. We don't have an opening intro song. We'll run into some copyright problems, which is my fault. My ignorance has caused the problem, so I'm going to resolve it in the next week or two, and we'll get it squared away. That's just by way of explanation. Secondarily, I'd like to ask you to continue to pray for Jerry DeLemus and his wife, Sue. Man still sits in jail after 2.5+ years for doing nothing. Anyway, hopefully things will change quickly, I hope, but we'll see.
Well, let me get in. Excuse me for interrupting, but you may remember Jerry. His wife Susan is running again for state rep from Rochester, so we'll give her some support.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah,
I didn't even know that. Thank you, Dick. The other thing I wanted to mention quickly was the nationallibertyalliance.org. Go to their website, join them. If you can contribute some money, please do so. If you can contribute some time, that's even better or as good. They're attempting to send out booklets to all the sheriffs in all 3,133 counties in America, educating the sheriffs on the law, because they don't know the law. They know statutes and codes and whatever the judge tells them to do, but they don't know law. And what we need to do, because we're all ignorant, or have been, is break this cycle. So I'd ask you to help them. They're one organization that's trying to do the right thing. Whichever one happens to reach the pinnacle first, I'm with. So contribute in one way or another. And I just wanted to make one last comment. I'm going to turn it over to Jim McKinley. The topic today is about human trafficking. And most people have heard of trafficking, human trafficking, drugs trafficking, weapon trafficking. There's a lot of different types. But the trafficking that we're talking about today is kind of a specialized version. And the reason that I'm even mentioning it is you're not aware of it. You probably don't even know it exists. However, everyone listening to this and everyone in the country, in America and in New Hampshire is involved with it. You're all involved. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. You're involved with it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim McKinley.
Okay, thanks, Richie. Just to follow up on what you're saying, you're absolutely right. And the fact is that every time you go and sign for your driver's license, you're being trafficked. And this is just not apparent to most people. People think of trafficking, they think of physical things, somebody being taken for prostitution or the pedophilia or something. But the majority of people that are being trafficked have absolutely no idea that it's occurring to them. And that's what we want to try to show you here. We've got some things to show you, and then we'll have a discussion on it. So we'll start off with a video. So Brandon, if you go ahead and run that video.
I want to make it clear today that my administration will focus on ending the absolutely horrific practice of human trafficking, and I am prepared to bring the full force and weight of our government to the federal and at the federal level and the other highest levels, whatever we can do in order to solve this horrific problem, getting worse, and it's happening in the United States. In addition to the rest of the world, but it's happening in the United States, which is terrible. Human trafficking is a dire problem, both domestically and internationally, and is one that's made really a challenge, and it's really made possible to a large extent, more of a modern phenomenon by what's taking place on the internet, as you probably know. Solving the human trafficking epidemic, which is what it is a priority for my administration. We're going to help out a lot. Solve is a wonderful word, a beautiful word, but I can tell you we're going to help a lot. I'll direct the Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security, and other federal agencies that have a role in preventing human trafficking to take a hard look at the resources and personnel that they're currently devoting to this fight. Now, they are devoting a lot, but we're going to be devoting more. Dedicated men and women across the federal government have focused on this for some time, as you know. A lot of you have been dealing with the federal government, and it's been much more focused over the last 4 weeks, I can tell you that. I cannot thank each of you enough, and the dedicated men and women who run my staff and your staffs, and getting everybody together was terrific. I was so glad I was able to be here. You start with really a tremendous amount of energy and blood, sweat and tears. Government can be helpful, but without you, nothing would happen. So again, I want to thank everybody in this room. It's a very, very terrible problem. It's not talked about enough. People don't know enough about it. And we're going to talk about it, and we're going to bring it out into the open, and hopefully we're going to do a great deal to help prevent some of the horrific, really horrific crimes that are taking place.
Okay. For years, the United Nations has had their Universal Declaration of Human Rights up. In Article 4, it states quite clearly, no one shall be held in slavery or servitude. Slavery and the slave trade shall be prohibited in all their forms. That's a key phrase there, because most people have no idea of the various forms that traffic can occur. So next slide. In 2000, the United States passed the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, and it was codified into 22 U.S.C., so it's part of the code of the United States. Next slide, please, Brendan. In there, in paragraph 71029B, it states, the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purposes of subjection to involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. Okay? That is what defines trafficking, and if you look at those key phrases there, we're going to talk about those in a little bit more detail here. Next slide, please. The important features of the Trafficking Protection Act is that physical transport from one locale to another is not a requirement. In other words, people have no physical idea that they're being trafficked, and that's what's so insidious about it. And the law also addresses the subtle means of coercion, including psychological coercion and trickery, and you can put fraud in there with it. Next slide. Okay, here's
We also have a statute. New Hampshire has a statute on trafficking.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
Okay. Fight Slavery Now has a nice little, I guess you'd call it a graphic up there, where they show you the means of trafficking, how it's done, and what they're trafficking people for. So next slide, please. If we apply that to the driver's license, what they're doing is they're obtaining people through fraud for purposes of debt enslavement. So that is what's going on, folks. That's what's happening, and you don't even know that it's happening. So next slide, please. So here we are, all us great boobus Americans. We have our iPhones, which we can stick our nose in all day. We're watching the game on our widescreen TV, drinking our beer, eating our Chippos, and we have no idea of the chain of debt that we're chained to. This is a great graphic from David Dees, who's a wonderful artist at putting out graphical ideas of what's going on in the human condition. So, thank you.
What we all learned with my House Bill 1778, as we study that and go into the background of it, we come up with the right to travel existed long before governments were created. And hey, Native Americans, they traveled on foot, they traveled by canoe on water, they traveled on horseback. They were travelers. And what we are travelers. But what has happened is the government, in its avarice and greed to bring in revenue, and that's why I coined the term RICO for revenue, because that's exactly what government is. Government is your enemy. I mean, for example, here in New Hampshire, you go out and buy a new Cadillac. I can't because I don't have the money. But if I have a new Cadillac, I'd be paying over $1,000 a year to the local municipality before I can get my registration, if I'm going to get a registration. No, you don't even need a registration. But there's no law or statute that requires you to pay the municipality that. But it's a belief system, and that's what our problem is. Our problem is we're confronted with a belief system. People believe that they have to pay that town tax before they can register. This is the problem. They have been brought up, they've been indoctrinated, and that's where we're at now. How do we overcome the belief system? That's my problem.
Well, just wanted to add that that's what's called the color of law for those people who don't know it out there. You think that it's the law, and it isn't the law. So it's under the color of law that you're getting a driver's license. And the state is participating in the fraud because they're not telling you, hey, you don't need a license, only if you're driving in commerce. And that's the way they traffic you. And what's worse, I just want to add this because I think it's extremely important, and this is why I get down on the judges. The police will give you a ticket. You'll go into the traffic court in front of a judge, and you'll pay the fine, generally speaking. Well, they're trafficking you through the courts through false pretenses because you don't need a driver's license, and even if you did, the driver's license that they issue to you is in the all caps name. It's an artificial person. It's not even you.
Yeah.
They do it all. It's all fraud. It's smoke and mirrors, and it's the language that the lawyers love to use. And, I used to have respect for lawyers. You go to law school, you do this, you do that. If the lawyers don't know this, shame on you, because you're participating in the destruction of this country as far as I'm concerned. There's no other way to put it. And if you don't know it, you should learn it, because if you're an attorney, you should know the law, not the statutes, codes, rules, regulations, and what your buddy in a bar room sharing a drink with you tells you. Look it up.
Yeah, and what people don't realize is debt bondage that we're being defrauded into is because we've all volunteered to be collateral for the national debt, this huge, horrendous debt that the people themselves had nothing to do with. It's all the corporation that has racked this up, and they want us to pay it off and be the collateral for it.
So you're trying to tell me, Jim, that the $1 trillion in student loan debt, that's trafficking? Is that what you're saying?
Something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It is. It is. I did something on the show a few weeks ago, and I said, a lot of these places, to go buy a car for $20,000, and if you can make the payments of $350 a month, go ahead and get it. So everybody, we all do this. Me too. I did it before. Well, I can afford $350 a month, so I'll buy the car. You buy the car, you take out a loan, $20,000 car. At the end of 7 years, because I got to stretch those payments out so I can afford it. I paid $25,000 for a car. It's only worth $20, and it's 7 years old now, so it's only worth
less.
It's only worth $10.
Right.
So what do? I'm sitting here going, wow, that was pretty good. Yeah, dummy, you paid $5,000 more for the car than it was worth. All right, who's making out in the deal? You or the banks?
And it's even worse when you get a mortgage on a house for 30 years. You're paying like almost 3 times what you think you're paying for the house.
5% interest on the 30-year notice,
Racks up fast.
150%.
Yep.
I don't want to diverse, but it goes back to 1913 when the Federal Reserve was created, and that was treason by Congress to even accept that. And they'd only had, I think, 3 congressmen, and it was 2 days before Christmas that they passed it. They weren't, the rest of the congressmen were home in their respective states enjoying the holiday, but they snuck that Federal Reserve through, and it started in 1914. And if anybody really wants to find the history of that, I'll tell you who lit my fuse, and that was Congressman Louis T. McFadden, McFadden. Read his June 10th, 1932 speech before Congress. If that doesn't ignite your fuse, I don't know what will.
Yeah.
No, it's very good.
It's a fraud.
I've seen it, yeah.
And we call them Federal Reserve Accounting Unit Denomination. That's what it is. And what does that spell? F-R-A-U-D. It is. It's fraud. Federal Reserve Accounting Unit. It's not money. They're debt instruments. Why? Because the Federal Reserve a note is a debt instrument. Who owns a note? Well, so we're discharging. This is interesting because that goes back to 1966 when Lyndon Baines Johnson committed treason and took the silver coins out of circulation. So there's no lawful money. Our Constitution says no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debt, or impair the obligation of contract. It's right there in the Constitution. It's being violated every day by our corporate governments, because there's your differentiation between a lawful constitutional republic and a corporate with its democracy. That's what it is, with a majority rule.
Can I expound on that a little bit, Dick?
Absolutely, please do.
I just wanted to say that the reason, and I've always stressed this point, the reason that we are in the situation we're in, and it's a lot more critical than people think, because the communist aspect of our own country, they call them the deep state, is ready to, I think they're going to do something drastic in the next 3 months. But aside from that,
I call them Democrats.
it's our ignorance that's killing us. And I'm not sitting here like some pompous jerk trying to convince you. I know I'm speaking for Dick, and I'm not trying to be insulting. These guys are my friends. But I'm sure Dick and Jim and myself were ignorant at one time. We're trying to learn. We're still ignorant of a lot of things, but we're trying to learn. My point is simply this. When the legislature passes something that's unconstitutional, we the people should be calling on them right away.
Absolutely.
When the police
Absolutely.
write the ticket, and I'm just using this as an example, we the people should be on them right away saying, whoa, 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 you can't be doing that. It's a bill of attainder. It's unconstitutional. Do you know what a bill of attainder is? No, I haven't read the Constitution, so I don't know what it is. Well, that's the problem. The cop doesn't read the Constitution. He asks the lawyers what the law is. Look at the lawyers that are on the fake news today. Everybody's a lawyer that they interview. Everybody. And here you got Trump saying, well, the Department of Justice is corrupt. Geez, really? There's over 10,000 attorneys in the Department of Justice. Do you wonder why they're corrupt? I mean, we have to start learning, and very quickly, our constitutions and understand what's been done to us. And we're trying to show you that on this show.
I want to pick up on Dick's belief system issue there, and that's exactly what it is. I had a friend who came in, was visiting, and we chatted about the need for a license. And I told him that he did not need to get a license. There was no lawful need for him to have one. And what was his response? Well, we'd have no way of taking care of the roads or anything, you know? And I said, that's taken care of on the commercial side. That's where it gets done. And he couldn't believe it. He walked out of there like I was a nutcase.
Well, you know, that's interesting, because that argument falls flat on its face, because the legislature many years ago introduced and passed, not passed, the people had to pass it. It's a constitutional amendment, which would be 66 and 2/3%, and that is Article 6A of Part 2. Article 6A is an exclusive fund. All revenue that comes in for bridges and road, it's maintained there. But what has happened is the socialists have dipped into that fund and reduced it so that it's not being used for bridges and roads. Why? Because it's been stolen by these other, I call them, you know what I call them? Pencil packer, paper pushing, pocket picking, prevaricating parasites, perpetuating positions of pernicious political persuasion for personal profit and power. Period.
Now you're all going to be.
It's easy for you to say.
You're all going to have to recite that back here, folks.
No, I was up in Franklin, 5-6 years ago, and I was talking to the American Legion group, and it was a packed hall. And I told the people, you don't need a driver's license. And every woman, probably a few men, but every woman in the place, their chin went. And their attitude was, well, how are you going to learn how to drive? The state has to test you. And I says, the state didn't teach me how to drive. I went to driver's education. I paid a private enterprise money to teach me how to drive. And plus, you know, I mean, as a kid, you're watching your parents and your friends and everybody drive. You kind of pick it up. It's through osmosis. But the testing program doesn't have to be through the state.
Absolutely not.
You have to be, well, you're taught to be responsible. I mean,
And it's
that's
not
part of
worth
the
much
problem.
anyway. They don't really test drivers here.
Let's show how a little bit closer as far as trafficking is concerned. Most people have a checkbook or something to do, or think they do, and then you can prove it to yourself. If you take out your checkbook and you look at your name, and in the upper left-hand corner of the check, and there it is, prominently printed in all capital letters. And you say, well, it's okay, that's my name. No, it isn't. That's not you. That is a creation called ens legis, E-N-S, second word, L-E-G-I-S, or to the street talk, it is a straw man. The reason is the bank can't do business with you personally. It can only do business with a fiction known as a corporation.
Right.
And that's your corporation. Now, if you take a high magnifying glass and you put it onto the so-called signature line of your check, you will see that it's microprint. See, what do you mean micro? Why is it microprint? To keep you from knowing that you are an authorized agent, because that's what that microprint says. Authorized agent, authorized agent, authorized agent.
The
You
bank-
are signing for the fiction up in the upper right hand.
The bank is authorizing you
Exactly.
to sign, yeah.
No, the bank doesn't authorize you anything. That's you are, under the UCC, you're an accommodation party. Quote, accommodation party. Look to the UCC. Now you say, well, what's the UCC? Uniform Commercial Code. Well, the Uniform Commercial Code came in around 1966 when Johnson took the silver out of circulation, and the Congress, having total control over interstate commerce, that's delegated to Congress as their authority, exclusive authority, Congress had to enact legislation to permit commercial paper, which the FRNs are. Federal Reserve notes are commercial paper. They're notes, instruments of debt in it. They're not money. So, and they can't be redeemed for money either. But what Congress did was they enacted what is known as the Tax Lien Act of 1966. And the Tax Lien Act of 1966 made it mandatory for all government to use the protocol of the Uniform Commercial Code in all business dealings with the people. So anything that you get from government, whether it's a summons on the street, it's a presentment. You read what the UCC says about a, quote, presentment, quote unquote. A presentment is, and this is, I'll give you the introduction to it, it's a demand. A demand for what? The government's demanding either money or property. It's demanding something, and that's what that piece of paper that you got from the government is about, a demand. It's a presentment under the UCC, and it's a demand. But here's the kicker. The only people that can make a demand
And make it
is
stick.
a holder in due course who has an instrument, which is a contract, that's got your signature on it. And if it hasn't got your signature, then they have no claim.
Yeah, there's nothing.
Absolutely. You know, in fact, believe it or not, I told Jim coming down today, I sent out op-ed to the news media in New Hampshire yesterday about this so-called Supreme Court decision relative to taxing our vendors on the internet. All they can do is they get something from Iowa or some other state says, hey, you're collecting tax for us. No, you just put on not accepted pursuant to, guess what? UCC 3-501. That's it. They are not the holder of a contract that can make any presentment to you because they don't have a contract. No
No.
contract, no claim.
We're
Let me
being-
follow up with you on your check thing where you talked about the signature line and so
Mm-hmm.
on. I looked at our checkbook, and we have several. Every place where you write the amount has a little box around
That's
it.
correct.
Four corners rule.
That's correct.
That number's not part of that document.
Yeah,
Not even part of it.
anything in a box is
Yeah,
taken right
that's
off the
why it's in
page.
the
Exactly.
box.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Put
And
in the
But
box.
people don't realize
People
that.
don't
They have no
understand.
clue.
There again, Jim, and that's the point I wanted to make, is that through our ignorance, we don't realize the microprint on the on the signature line. We don't realize the box with the money in there. We don't realize a lot of different things, and we've been taken for granted. People say we've been dumbed down. I don't think people realize how much we've been dumbed down.
I agree with you.
The founding fathers were geniuses,
Absolutely.
and we're kindergartens compared to them. I mean, it's really a massive difference. And I didn't even know it until the last, say, 5 years, working with you guys and stuff and just learning this. A lot of people have pointed me in the right direction, and that's the reason for the show, is we're trying to help you guys out. You're being trafficked. Everybody's being trafficked. There's no exclusion. And if you want to sit there and say you're crazy, keep saying you're crazy. When they pull up with the white buses that are totally unmarked, except for the government plate, and armed guards get out, and they say, come on, you're coming with me, taking you to FEMA camp, that's when you want to start complaining.
A little too late then,
See if
isn't
it
it?
does you any good.
I got one comment. Let me share this with you. My wife comes down on it, and she just really did something. I try to avoid the words ask and request anything from government. Why? Because Article 32 of the New Hampshire Constitution Bill of Rights is very explicit. We have the right to instruct our public servants and public officials, and that is a power that the sovereign, we're sovereigns,
Yeah.
without subjects, but we're sovereigns, and as such, we have that power. And the other thing she says, hey, you catch more flies with sugar than you do with vinegar. Instead of calling people ignorant or stupid or whatever, they're she said, this is her, they're unaware that they're unaware. She says it's a much more charitable way of conveying the
you're
problem
right.
that you're confronted with. And I got to hand it to her. She's absolutely correct.
She is
Words-
correct.
Words have meanings, and meanings have words. And if you come across with some crusty words, people listen to him or talk to him. But if you can come up with some more acceptable verbiage,
I'll tell you why- I'll
maybe
tell you
the
why I use it
viewer
then.
will accept it.
I use it because I've talked to a lot of people for a long time, and I don't feel as though they're listening. And I'm not insulting by saying ignorance means you're just not aware. You're unfamiliar. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. You're not stupid. None of us are stupid. Being ignorant means you don't know. If you don't know how to split an atom, you're ignorant about it, right? That's all it means. But you raise a good point, Dick. There could be a more charitable word. I'm just trying to kind of hit someone between the eyes,
I
figuratively
know.
speaking, to wake them up. Because it's time to wake up. It's, we're at a critical time here in this country. It's never happened in the United States, and most people walk around as if, what are they talking about? Everything's fine. I got a job, I'm paying my taxes. They don't realize. Anyway,
Anyhow,
you guys can pick it
we're
up.
all slaves right now if you have a driver's license. Why? Because you entered into a contract with the corporate government, and you got to abide by the corporate government's dictate because you, for example, they invite you to purchase a title, but it's not a title. It's a certificate saying that a title exists. It's just a piece of paper, and you're paying $15 or $20 or whatever they charge you now. I don't have one. I will never title my automobile. Why? Motor vehicle is a different story, and there's a distinct difference between a motor vehicle and a automobile.
Right.
I had over 40s to read the keys, and I picked up another one I just mentioned to Jim Cummins, which were I think it was North Carolina. Case Reno versus Condon, Reno versus Condon in 2000. Supreme Court got it. And the information that you give to the motor vehicle department is considered, now I got to follow up on this one, is all, guess what? Interstate commerce, which is controlled by Congress, not by our Division of Motor Vehicles.
Right.
That's interesting. I got to follow up on this one.
You got something to add, because we're close. Got about
Okay.
a minute left.
Yeah, I'll just close off in reminding people what Morpheus said to Neo in the Matrix movie. He says, Neo, you were born a slave and you're still a slave. And he's addressing every one of us.
Well, that's very true. Please share this video. We are all trafficked, and we have to smarten up, understand what's going on. And I blame the lawyers. There are good lawyers out there, so start changing, guys. Start fighting for the good guys. Stop playing the word games. Person. Am I an artificial person or a human being with a body and soul? Because there's two different definitions in the dictionary. Thank you for watching. Thank you to my guest, and we'll see you next week. Please share.